Hi, welcome to the MCB Community Update. I'm your host, Eric Joseph, Executive Director of the Audible Local Ledger, part of the Massachusetts Audio Information Network, or MAIN, which provides reading services across the state of Massachusetts to people who are blind or print disabled. The MCB Community Update will interview Commissioner John Oliveira quarterly, and it will speak with other members of the MCB to find out more about the services and support that MCB offers the blind community. We welcome feedback and any suggested questions that you might want asked. Now, here is this month's MCB Community Update. Good morning. Our guest this month on MCB Community Update is Region 4 Director Jay Rufo. I'm particularly interested in Jay's story because he's blind, has overcome obstacles, and has risen to a leadership position at MCB. There are 6 regions in the state that have directors. Region 4 represents the Metrowest part of Massachusetts. Welcome, Jay. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining us. As I said, I'm as interested in you as I am in your team, and I'm interested in both quite a bit. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about yourself, about your work history, maybe how you came to MCB, about your health, what you're comfortable with sharing about your health, and have you always been involved with state agencies or assisting people who are disabled in some manner?
Yeah, for the most part, the answer is I've been involved in jobs primarily related to blindness for the most part throughout my career. In the early 2000s, I graduated from Anna Maria College in Paxton, Mass, and I had an MBA ultimately that I earned through them. Now, what I was thinking of doing at that particular time was financial related things. I was going to be potentially a stockbroker or a financial planner. But when I got out of college, what I realized as a person with a vision impairment is that, I didn't really think that my computer skills were quite up to snuff to be able to do that. And I also knew that I had some challenges with regard to mobility and orientation. So when I graduated, I took about a year off to really focus on those 2 core blindness skills that I felt I really needed to be really good at in order to pursue that type of career. So that's exactly what I did. I contacted the Mass Commission for the Blind. I explained, hey, this is what I want to do, got involved in the vocational rehab program, and began receiving services that would allow me to perfect those skills or at least enhance them. So that's what I did for that year. When I felt comfortable, then I started wading into the financial services arena. And after going on multiple interviews and those kind of things and being offered some positions, I really felt to myself, you know what, maybe finance isn't exactly the thing that I want to focus on. So on a whim, I was looking online for potential job opportunities, and I came across an opportunity to be a program director at WICN, which is the local public radio station in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm originally from Spencer, Mass, not too far away. And I went and I had an interview with Brian Barlow at the time. Brian liked what I had to say, but he said, hey, look, you don't really have a great deal of radio experience. So I don't know if this would really be the type of thing that, we would be looking for. We want someone with more experience. So I said, okay, I do understand that. But what he said to me at that time is, we have a sister station in Worcester called Audio Journal, which is the radio reading service of Central Massachusetts. And I said, wow, I've never heard of that before. I said, okay, well, how can I get in touch with them? He said, no worries, I'll have them contact you. So the director of Audio Journal at that time, a couple of days later, his name is Vince Lombardi, no longer works there anymore, has retired, but called me and said, why don't you come in, let's have a talk. And he said, hey, we're looking for a outreach and development coordinator. And I said, oh, okay. And then I thought to myself, hey, this is where I can use all of my financial knowledge and I can use all my new computer skills and I can really for the first time, put all my skills to the test in a really nice, nurturing environment. And, I can also at the same time, I think, be of benefit to audio journals. So I wound up taking a job that I was offered, worked for them for about 5 years, where I was raising money for them. I was doing a lot of public speaking appearances, and I really enjoyed watching the volunteers come in. I enjoyed watching them read. I enjoyed the various radio programs that people would put together. So I remember saying to Vince one day, "Hey, do you think I can get perhaps a slot to do a radio program?" And he said, "Well, you can fill in for someone who isn't going to, unfortunately, be able to host this upcoming radio show called Out of Sight." So I said, "Okay, I'll give it a shot. When do I do this?" And he said, "Tomorrow." So be careful what you wish for sometimes. So I kind of white knuckled my way through that first interview, and I just found to absolutely love being able to interview people, especially those in the blindness community. So from there, I got my own radio show with Audio Journal and began booking guests, and really started to learn the intricacies and the art of recording, editing, interview techniques. So I was with Audio Journal for just about 5 years. I picked up a couple of international broadcast awards and those kind of things, and really just loved that side of the business. Subsequently, what had happened is the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind around 2009 said, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to join us that can teach radio broadcasting and communications to some of our VR consumers." And these would be communications techniques that can be used in pretty much any job. Doesn't have to be radio broadcasting. And it was also a way to be able to increase people's computer skills and abilities. So subsequently, I was hired in 2009 with the Commission for the Blind, and I began basically directing this new program. It was called the VOICE program, Vocational Opportunities and Communications Education is what it stood for. And did that for about 4 years and brought in a lot of people. We had professional radio studios built. Individuals got to do radio programs and learn those communications techniques. And then those were broadcast over the radio reading services. From there, I moved on. I wound up teaching at the Commission for the Blind computer skills to consumers for a couple of years. Then I became the Randolph Shepherd Vending Facilities Director for about 5 years. And then just about 4 years ago, became Regional Director here at the Commission for the Blind of the Metrowest region. So it really has been a nice journey. You never know where life is going to take you. And from humble beginnings of just simply going on an interview to work at a public radio station, 15 years later, this is where I find myself. So you never know where life's going to take you.
Ain't that the truth? Oh my goodness. Jay, were you born blind? Did you have vision at any point in your life?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for asking. So I was born sighted. I had a reaction to a prescription medication when I was 3 years old that damaged my eyes. It put me in the hospital for 6 weeks. After that 6 week period, I could no longer see out of my left eye, but I still had perfect vision in my right. However, my right eye was damaged because of all that had happened. Subsequently, 10 years later, when I was 13, because of that damage that had happened, my vision slowly began to go downhill, and I was registered as legally blind at 13. And then from 13 to 20, I had a lot of different eye surgeries and a lot of different complications. And finally, at the age of 20, I had no light perception and was totally blind at that point. And what I always like to say to consumers that I talk to is that I truly do know what they're going through. I've had just about every type of eye diagnosis. I've had corneal transplants, cataracts, retinal detachments, scleral patches, iris removals, you name it. So, you know, all things happen for a reason. I truly do believe that. And that has really given me a really good jumping off point when talking to consumers to say, listen, I know what you're going through. I've been through this and I've come through on the other side. And I know that through our rehabilitation efforts and working with the Commission for the Blind, we're going to get you through this as well. And you can do anything that you want to do, and we'll be here to support you.
I'm sure that makes you extremely compassionate and relatable when you are doing your interactions with when you're having your different interactions. And thank you for sharing so much about yourself and being so honest with your past and how you've come to the position that you're at. Congratulations on a terrific career. Sounds like your career is going well and it's moved up at every stage, which is what everybody wants in their career. Just keep advancing and doing good work and, enjoying it as much as possible. For me, talking about you never know, I started at Talking Information Center as a volunteer. Our paths aren't that different in the sense of the work career because I spent 5 years reading the Wall Street Journal to listeners and producing radio plays and just as a volunteer enjoying it. And then when a position opened up at the Audible Local Ledger in Mashpee, I took it over and we have had a robust development there. So you're right. You just never know. I
Mm-hmm.
volunteered because my mom had volunteered there, and I thought it was kind of fun. And then all of a sudden, I really loved it, and it felt really good to me to be working in that field after having been in Manhattan with fairly high pressure jobs through most of my career. This was supposed to be sort of this is almost semi-retirement. And I actually work a lot more hours
Mm-hmm.
now because it's not even work most of the time for me. I feel
Right.
like it's just enjoyable producing and helping and hearing what's going on. So we've talked a little bit about ourselves. Now let's move on to your team, perhaps a little bit, and how your actual services in Region 4, how Region 4 works. So maybe you could outline a little bit about Region 4's services that are offered, and then even more importantly, probably the process that a person would go through to receive that training or those services that MCB offers.
Absolutely. So we're Region 4. We serve the Metro West region of the state. So you could consider the 128, 495 belts, all of those towns and cities that are encompassed by those roadways. So we serve about 60 towns and cities. Some of the bigger ones would be Somerville, Cambridge. And then we also do smaller municipalities, as far west as Natick, Plainville to the south, so on. The services that we offer in Region 4 are the same as the other regions, of which there are 6 at MCB. And they really fall into 2 really large camps. The first suite of services are vocational rehabilitation services. So these are services for legally blind individuals that are looking to regain or sometimes take their first steps into gainful employment. And then the other camp is social rehabilitation. This is for individuals that really want to get some skills and acquire some knowledge that would allow them to be more independent in their homes and in their communities. So typically, consumers fall into one of those 2 groups. And then there are ancillary services. And it doesn't matter if you're in vocational rehabilitation or social rehabilitation. Some of the services that people can get would be things like adaptive technology training. We have a whole adaptive technology department that serves both social rehabilitation and vocational rehabilitation consumers. There's orientation and mobility, so how to navigate safely and independently. We also have rehabilitation teaching. So these are a group of professionals from MCB that are assigned to consumers. They come into their homes or where they live, and they help them with a wide variety of daily living techniques. Just endless and great people. I've benefited a lot from RT services in the past. So those are some of the services that individuals are eligible for. And the way that this works essentially is um, the way a person is registered with the Commission for the Blind is through their eye doctor. So a person would go to their ophthalmologist or optometrist, they perform an eye exam, and if they meet the requirements of legal blindness, which is a state requirement, then those eye doctors are legally mandated to report those individuals to the Commission for the Blind. They come to our registration team here at MCB. And when a determination is made that truly, yes, a person is legally blind, then they're put on our register. And then one of the 6 regional directors, depending on where this individual lives, is notified. And then we take a look at the case. We pass that off to supervisors, either a vocational rehabilitation supervisor or social rehabilitation supervisor. And then ultimately, those are the individuals that assign that consumer to a case manager. And that case manager is typically a social worker. That's going to be their point of contact at the Commission for the Blind going forward. That case manager will then call the consumer and have a discussion about who we are, what it is that we do, explain some of the services that are available. And if a consumer wants to participate in our services, which of course are fully voluntary, then that case manager and that consumer will work together to develop a plan. And then we'll go ahead along with the consumer and execute that plan and deliver those services to make sure that the consumer is getting the skills that they need in order to prosper. So that's a little bit about how it works in all regions and specifically here in Region 4.
Great, great, thanks. And I'm sure that the caseworkers, because of your experience with Audio Journal, bring up the idea that one of the services that are available that's free are reading services for themselves. I found that that's pushed at different points as a benefit to consumers, mainly because many of them are a little overwhelmed from what I've heard in that first meeting. An awful lot of information is given, and I can imagine many would be, in fact, most are probably resistant or reluctant in the very beginning to get involved too much because they're still trying to process what's going on. So when you list out, here are some things that you can do, here's how orientation will work, or here's how we have these reading services that can keep you engaged and included inside your community. Even if you're isolated, you'll know obituaries, you'll know grocery prices, you'll have information on town meeting, you'll have political information about your neighborhood, things like that. That, I imagine, kind of slips right by when they're first hearing about, whoa, what are my options? Many of these are big scale options. And we have spoken with various directors of orientation and mobility, registration, assistive technology, adaptive technology, the Shepherd program. And listeners, if you haven't heard those interviews, or if you have vision, if you haven't seen them, wherever you're watching, if you have vision, or listening, you can also catch up on those. And we have gotten a lot of feedback that they're helpful and have a lot of information. So I encourage you to source those out. So the person who leads the contact is probably might get rejected, rebuffed at first. Is that a reasonable assumption, that they get used to, maybe I'm not quite ready for this yet?
Yeah, that certainly can happen. Some people are a little bit more accepting up front and more willing to engage in services early. And in some cases, it takes people a long period of time or longer period of time because there's a lot that's going on. I actually fell into the secondary camp that I was talking about. When I was diagnosed and registered as legally blind at 13, I'll be honest, I mean, there's a lot to go through. There's a lot to come to terms with. And I was not ready for services at 13. In fact, it took me several years before I was really in a place psychologically where I could fully engage and understand in the rehabilitation process. And I'm just so grateful to my vocational counselor at the time. His name was Sharon Strakowski, for being incredibly patient with me, always checking up on me, and when I was ready, executing the services that I needed. So, I can tell you from personal experience that it is a lot when you're diagnosed as being legally blind. There's a lot that one is thinking about. What is my life going to be like at this point? What are the pitfalls? How am I going to overcome these things? That's normal. And some people, it takes a while, like me, and other people, it takes a little bit less time. It's really dependent on where a person is. But nonetheless, the Commission for the Blind is always here, and always has been for me and for the countless thousands of other people that are legally blind in the Commonwealth. So I hope that answers a little bit.
It does. It does, Jay. And I'm curious, the different counselors for, say, orientation and mobility, are they assigned to Region 4, or is this a spider web across the state where there's a layer of the director who then hands it off to the spider web across the state, who then decides what the caseworker can go and kind of build almost an IEP around, an individual education plan of some sort? Is that the layered look to this process?
It's an excellent question. And what I would say is the person's primary contact would be their case manager, so either SR or VR case manager. And then when the services are delivered, such as orientation and mobility or assistive technology, those are two separate departments at MCB, but each region has a liaison that's part of either orientation and mobility or assistive technology. So, for instance, here in Region 4, there's a dedicated orientation and mobility professional that is part of the O&M unit, but they only work with people in our region, that specific individual. The same applies for adaptive technology. So what would happen is if those services were required, the case manager would put in a referral for those services that would go to either of those two departments or rehabilitation teaching for a third department. And then those liaisons specifically, engaged with our region would get those referrals, and then they would dispense the services. So it's a little less of a spider web. It's a little bit more organized, but that's how it generally works. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. I really appreciate that. And I do know many of our listeners you've kind of answered already what most of my next question was, but many of our listeners undergoing this are are fearful. They have a tremendous amount of fear, and I've heard this from them as they transition. We're out often in the community ourselves. We're trying to get out of the office as much as we can, out of the studios, and one of our goals with this podcast in particular, the MCB Community Update, is to demystify the process so that they know there are tools, there are services, there is a little bit of help that can come in as much or as little as you want. And we have found that the more information people have, the more that fear is tamped down. And it just again underscores how important that initial interaction is, and having the ability to read over a phone, I assume, when they're speaking to somebody about the caseworker trying to set up that first meeting, trying to read, are they ready for this, or should I back off a little bit, or am I, and I imagine that takes some skill and some experience to be able to do that well.
Absolutely. What I can say is that the case managers in our region and the case managers really uh, throughout the agency, these are professional social workers. These are individuals that are highly trained. And in a good number of cases, they're also, just as I am, a client or a consumer of the Commission for the Blind. So they've gone through this before too. Certainly not all, but a good number of them too. The Commission for the Blind has been around for close to 120 years now, and we know how to do this job, and we stand ready and willing to help any legally blind consumer of the state accomplish those things that they want to. And what I would say is fear, I think, when you're going into something like this, the great unknown for the first time is completely normal. But what I would say is don't let fear paralyze you. Talk to the people in the know. Talk to us here at the Commission for the Blind. And we pride ourselves on working with individuals to help them accomplish their goals. And we're always here for them, whether it's tomorrow or it's in a couple of months if somebody wants to give us a call if they know that they're registered.
That's very encouraging and inspiring, Jay. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, we like to end on a note with a bit of personal insight, and note is a deliberate pun because we're going to ask you what your first concert was and your favorite band or artist.
Great. So my first concert, I was 4 years old, and I was really into Kenny Rogers at the time, if anyone remembers good old Kenny. So I remember it was at the Worcester Centrum. I still have really vivid memories of that. So that was kind of my first experience in music. Interestingly, when I was 14 years old, I was a drummer. I began playing in rock and roll bands, and that turned into heavy metal bands. And I was a percussionist for about 30 years or so. Still play a little bit here and
Wow.
there. So music is something that is very near and dear to me. And if I had to say who my favorite band is, I'm a child of the 90s. And as I mentioned, I played a lot of heavy metal music. And my favorite band is Pantera, if anyone remembers those folks from
Three
Texas.
guitarists, right? Aren't there
Yeah,
like
well,
three
hey,
guitars?
well, I tell you, it always sounded like there were three guitarists. So I'll tell you, a very, very talented band in my opinion. And yeah, those are the people that, when I was a kid and even today, still listen to them all the time.
Excellent. From Kenny Rogers to Pantera. Now
There you go.
that is quite an evolution.
It really is. I'll tell
Oh,
you, it
geez,
is.
Jay. Hey, Jay, thank you so much for all the insight you've provided. It was really informative. I think people will absolutely take a lot of benefits out of this half hour or so that we've been talking. Um, Folks, I hope you've been listening to what Jay was talking about when it came to fear and his inspirational talk at the end there. And if not, go back and listen to it again because it's very good. Join us next month when we host our quarterly chat with Commissioner John Oliveira. Hey, Jay, thanks again, and bye for now.
Thanks, Eric. Pleasure to be here today. Take care.
Bye.